Hey there, Drowsy Historian here. Tonight, you're in the heart of opulence, the Palace of Versailles, under the reign of Louis XIV, where gilded halls, mirrored corridors, and endless gardens stretch as far as the eye can see. You're not a noble or a courtier, just an ordinary servant drifting through a waking palace. Before we start, do me one small favour. Tell me where you're listening from and what time it is there. If you'd prefer these stories without ads, you can join the Patreon. It's linked in the description. And if you want the ultimate immersive experience, consider using a pair of wireless earbuds. They're comfortable, discreet, and designed so you can wear them even while sleeping. I've linked my favourite pair, plus other sleep tools, in the description. Now, lie back. Get comfortable. Let's begin. You wake before the sun dares to touch the sky. The air is thick and sour, full of the quiet sounds of others still asleep. Slow breaths, the creak of straw, the faint shifting of bodies that never quite rest. The walls are close, and the ceiling leaks a kind of darkness that smells of damp wool and smoke. You've been dreaming of nothing again. Dreams are a luxury the palace keeps for its masters. You push yourself up. The floorboards sigh beneath you, heavy with yesterday's footsteps. Someone's candle has burned out in its dish, leaving a small pool of wax hardened into the shape of a teardrop. You think it's beautiful, in the way still things often are. There is no window in your room, only a thin slit that pretends to be one, a narrow wound in the wall where faint grey air seeps in. You can tell what time it is by the colour of that air, not black anymore. Not quite blue, just the hour when the world hasn't decided to wake and everything is held in suspension. You dress without thinking. The fabric is coarse, still damp from where it hung overnight. It never truly dries in these rooms. You tie the same apron, pull the same sleeves over the same arms, and think of nothing at all. The trick is not to think too early. The mind, if left unchecked, will start remembering what the day holds. Your hands already know what to do. They reach for the rag, the brush, the tin of polish that always smells faintly of vinegar and fatigue. You walk out into the corridor, careful not to wake the others. Each step feels borrowed, as though the silence itself has allowed you passage for now. The corridor is narrow, lit by a single oil lamp. The flame quivers as you pass, and for a moment it paints your shadow across the wall. A tall, thin shape, bending under the weight of habit. You've seen that shape for years, but it never feels like yours. It belongs to the palace, like everything else. You descend the small stairway that curls into the servants' hall. The air changes as you move lower, colder, sharper, carrying the faint smell of soap and brass. Down here, the day begins before it's allowed to exist upstairs. A small group has already started working, faces half hidden in the candlelight. No one speaks much. Voices feel too human for this hour. You find your place at the table, set out your brushes, and begin to polish. The metal pieces wait for you like sleeping eyes. Candlesticks, buckles, frames, handles, all things meant to shine more than you ever could. The sound of cloth against gold is soft but constant, a rhythm of servitude disguised as care. You polish, and the gold responds. It brightens slowly, catching the faintest suggestion of morning that leaks through the cracks above. Sometimes you imagine the gold remembering you, some small trace of your reflection living inside it, even if only for a second. But gold forgets faster than people. Its purpose is to shine, not to remember. The room smells of metal and wax, and something older. Something like exhaustion turned solid. The smell of centuries condensed into work. You take another breath, and it fills your lungs like dust. Around you, the others keep moving. One scrubs the floor in slow circles. Another trims candle wicks with hands so steady they could carve silence. Everyone moves at the same rhythm, like parts of a well-made clock. The palace above depends on it, the invisible machine that turns behind the curtains of splendor. You think of the people upstairs, still sleeping in their embroidered beds, wrapped in perfumes and clean linens. They will wake to warmth and colour and the illusion of divine order. You will wake again tomorrow to the same darkness. But that's the order of things. Even the sun has its hierarchy. The light changes. It begins as a whisper along the edges of the wall, a thin gold line seeping through cracks and keyholes. Then it spreads, slow and cautious, until the room glows with the faint colour of butter and smoke. You glance up. The sun is rising, though you cannot see it. You can only see its effect, the soft unveiling of the world. You wipe your hands and carry the polished pieces to the shelves where they will wait to be admired by people who will never know who cleaned them. The shelves themselves gleam faintly, reflecting one another like shallow water. You can see fragments of yourself repeated in the surfaces, the same bowed head, the same motion. The clock in the corner ticks like a patient cough. Somewhere beyond the wall, footsteps echo, measured, distant, belonging to someone of importance. You pause for a moment, just to listen. The sound is smooth, deliberate. You can always tell a noble by the rhythm of their walk. They move as if the floor itself were grateful to hold them. You go back to work. Your hands are starting to ache now, the polish eating into the small cuts across your knuckles. You don't mind. Pain, in moderation, helps you feel real. Without it, the hours would pass too quietly, like dust collecting in light. A bell rings somewhere above, faint, metallic, precise, the first signal of the day. You straighten your back, stretch your fingers, and glance once toward the ceiling. The sound means others are beginning to wake. The cooks, the valets, the chambermaids. The great choreography of Versailles has begun its morning rehearsal. You carry the candlesticks to the antechamber. The floor is colder here, smooth stone polished by generations of footsteps. The light from the high windows falls like liquid glass. Pale and filtered, dust floats in it, suspended in slow motion. It almost looks like snow. You place the candlesticks carefully along the mantel, aligning each one so that no reflection is out of order. Behind them, the wall catches your blurred reflection once again, a servant framed by gold, standing inside a painting that never changes. You wipe the last bit of wax from your fingers. The smell of it stays, sweet and faintly rancid. It clings to you the way all things from this palace do, invisible but persistent. The corridor beyond the door hums with the beginning of life. Trays clatter softly, voices rise and fall, muffled by distance and etiquette. You move through them like smoke, unseen, unbothered, indispensable. Somewhere beyond, the king still sleeps. You imagine the stillness of that room, the heavy curtains, the faint perfume, the quiet authority of a heartbeat that determines the pace of a nation. They call him the sun, but even the sun needs its servants to rise. You step back into the corridor. The walls glimmer faintly under candlelight, veins of marble running like rivers through the stone. You can feel the day pressing forward, as though the palace itself is inhaling before it speaks. The sound of your footsteps folds into the rhythm of others. Hundreds of small movements, all synchronized into something larger, something ancient. You are one pulse among many, keeping time for the glory above. You walk toward the next task. The light grows stronger. The gold you polish gleams behind you, perfect and silent, waiting to be admired by someone who will never think of the hands that touched it. And as you move through the quiet hall, the air still cool from the night, you feel the palace awakening, a slow, inevitable breathing that fills every corridor. The day has begun, though it never truly ended. Somewhere, a door opens. Somewhere, a voice murmurs orders. Somewhere, another servant begins to sweep. You take another breath, tasting the faint sweetness of candle smoke and wax. The work continues. It always continues. You move through the corridors before the noise begins. The air is cool here, touched with the faint scent of wet stone and candle soot. Every surface has been built to echo greatness, yet the sound of your own footsteps disappears before it reaches the next turn. It's as if the palace swallows noise out of habit. It consumes everything that tries to exist within it. The floor beneath you gleams faintly. You know this shine. It comes from hours of labour hidden behind locked doors, hands that buff and wash until marble remembers its own reflection. Your shoes make no sound against it. Silence clings to your ankles like dust. The corridor stretches onward, narrow and tall, lined with portraits whose eyes follow nothing. Each face has been painted to last forever, noble, serene, untouchable. You've walked past them so many times that they no longer look like people, only shapes of authority framed in gold. You wonder if they ever looked at servants like you, or if they learned early to look through instead. A draught moves through the hall, carrying the faint perfume of beeswax and cold iron. The candles waver, shadows slide gently up the walls, bending around the corners where the corridors split and twist like veins. You know these turns without thought. The body remembers what the mind tries to forget. Every distance, every door, every shortcut meant only for those below. Somewhere above, faintly, the palace begins to stir. The first sounds reach you through the ceiling. A muffled cough, the clatter of porcelain. A chair moved just enough to complain. The world of silk and powdered wigs stretches, yawns, and prepares to be seen. You pause beside a window and glance out. The gardens beyond are still grey, trapped between night and morning. Rows of hedges stand in military precision, perfectly identical, like thoughts repeated until they lose meaning beyond them. Fountains sleep, their water still as glass. You can almost see your reflection trembling in the glass pane, ghostly and colourless. The glass hums faintly under your fingertips, thin and fragile. You imagine what would happen if it shattered. Not the sound of it, but the silence afterward, the kind of silence that demands explanation. You step back before the thought grows. Further down the hall, a fellow servant crosses your path, a boy you've seen for years but never truly known. His eyes meet yours only briefly, enough for a flicker of recognition, then drop again. You both nod slightly, as if to confirm that you exist, then pass like shadows meeting their own reflections. In this palace, acknowledgement is a form of rebellion, and rebellion has no place before breakfast. You continue walking. The corridor changes texture subtly. Marble gives way to wood. Painted panels breathe out a faint smell of varnish and age. The shift marks an invisible boundary, the difference between the public world of grandeur and the hidden arteries where the palace's servants move unseen. You enter one of these smaller halls. The ceilings are lower here, the air warmer. The sound of cloth rustling, buckets scraping, whispered words about nothing in particular. You listen without listening, catching fragments of sentences, complaints about sore hands, rumours about a new steward, someone laughing quietly at nothing at all. It's the kind of laughter that fades before it's finished, the kind that remembers where it is. A broom leans against the wall, bristles worn thin. You pick it up automatically, brushing along the edges of the corridor, where dust gathers despite everything. The motion is slow, circular, patient. You watch the dust swirl in tiny clouds that catch the faint lights like stars before disappearing again. There is something strangely holy in the act, the worship of order in a place that thrives on appearances. Above you hear footsteps, heavier ones, deliberate, the kind that belong to someone who matters. You step aside instinctively, flattening yourself against the wall. The habit is older than thought. Even when you are alone, you still make room for others. The footsteps pass, faint echoes of authority lost in stone. You return to sweeping, to the small comfort of repetition. You've learned that movement, no matter how meaningless, keeps the mind quiet. Stillness invites thoughts, and thoughts are dangerous here. Light grows stronger by the minute, slipping through the high windows like liquid gold. It paints the walls in slow-moving bands, climbing upward as the sun rises. The air begins to warm, bringing with it the faint sweetness of wax and soap. You can hear the palace waking, distant conversations, doors opening, the clink of metal basins carried down hallways. You keep walking, your shadow following dutifully, stretching and shrinking as the light changes. There are corridors that lead nowhere, built only to impress symmetry upon the eye. You've walked through them countless times, corridors designed not for use but for effect. It's strange to think of architecture made to deceive. You begin to suspect that the palace itself was never meant to be lived in, only admired, a place where even air feels rehearsed. You turn a corner and come upon a pair of tall doors, slightly ajar. Through the gap you see the faint shimmer of mirrors and the edge of gilded moulding. You recognize the hallway beyond, one of the grand corridors where guests pass, where servants are supposed to remain invisible. You hesitate, listening for voices. There are none. You step quietly inside. The air changes again. It's colder here, heavier, filled with perfume and stillness. The marble floor gleams beneath your shoes, so polished that the candlelight looks like drops of molten gold scattered across its surface. The mirrors along the walls reflect endlessly. Yourself, the candles, the doors, all stretching into an illusion of infinity. You walk slowly, afraid to disturb the quiet. Each step feels softer than the last, as though the palace itself has decided to erase you. You glance into one of the mirrors. The person you see looks faintly transparent, like a shadow pretending to be human. You lift a hand, and the reflection follows with perfect obedience. The gold frames along the mirrors are carved with delicate vines, tiny flowers, and faces of cherubs that never blink. You trace one with your eyes, the craftsmanship precise enough to feel cruel. You can almost hear the hands that made it, hands like yours, unseen and unremembered. Somewhere far away, a door slams. The sound travels slowly through the air, dulled by distance and grandeur. It fades before it reaches you. You stand for a moment longer, letting the silence settle around you. It's a deep kind of silence, not empty, but full of things that refuse to speak. You imagine all the years layered in it, the countless footsteps, the voices swallowed whole. The palace holds them all, pressed between walls like insects in amber. A thin ray of sunlight breaks through the high window, striking one of the mirrors. For an instant, the entire hall ignites, gold flaring, glass shimmering, air glowing like dust caught in divinity. Then it fades again, leaving only the afterimage in your eyes. You blink, exhale slowly, and turn away. The corridor continues, long and identical, as if time itself has been folded into architecture. You walk on, counting the doors without realizing it, feeling the faint pulse of the building beneath your feet. The palace lives through you. Your breath, your steps, your work, but it will never remember your name. Ahead, the hall bends toward the servants' wing, again, where the faint smell of soap returns and the sound of life grows louder. You follow it instinctively, guided by routine, by repetition, by the simple comfort of knowing what comes next. As you move through the narrowing passage, light from above begins to shift. It deepens to the color of cream and gold, the hue of candles being lit upstairs. Somewhere, the king's day is about to begin, and everything must be ready to catch his reflection. You reach the end of the hall, where the marble ends and the smell of brass begins. Your broom touches the floor one last time, gathering the final line of dust. You straighten, wipe your hands, and move toward the next room, where the machinery of morning is waiting to begin again. The corridors fall silent behind you, as they always do. Polished, perfect, and utterly indifferent. The corridors lead you down toward the rooms where the air changes again. Heavier, sweeter, touched by the warmth of rising fires and scented oils. The hum of activity grows around you, a low and constant murmur that feels less like conversation and more like the grinding of unseen gears. You've entered the part of the morning where everything begins to move, but nothing yet feels alive. Candles tremble along the hallway walls, their light bending over portraits and brass fixtures. The palace has begun to breathe. You can feel it, slow, deliberate, vast. A bell rings in the distance, soft but certain. It marks the hour when the king begins to stir. The sound travels through the corridors like a pulse. Around you, people respond without words. A nod, a shift, a quickening of motion. You do the same. Your body knows what to do. The basins must be ready before the doors open. You carry one in each hand. Their rims cool against your palms. The water inside stills after each step, reflecting faint streaks of candlelight. You can see your face in it, wavering, then gone. The room smells of linen and iron. Towels are folded precisely, each corner matching the next, as if any error might fracture the entire order of things. You arrange them the way you were taught, in silence, with reverence, as if each cloth carries a secret you'll never be allowed to know. The perfumes stand in a row on a narrow shelf, small glass bottles with gold stoppers. Some smell of orange blossom, others of musk and amber. The strongest of them are almost unbearable this early, a sweetness that clings to the throat and burns faintly behind the eyes. You line them up, label facing forward, and think of how much scent it takes to hide the smell of humanity. Outside the chamber, the faint rhythm of steps grows louder. Valets, stewards, attendants, each one in their proper place, each one a cog in the vast machine that is about to turn. The ritual must unfold exactly as it has for years, perhaps decades, each movement following the next without question or thought. You stand near the basin, eyes down, waiting for the signal. The walls feel closer now. The air inside the room holds its breath. Then the door opens. A rush of colder air enters, touched by perfume and something metallic. You bow your head slightly, as the others do. The floor creaks softly under the weight of fine shoes. There are murmured voices, then silence again. That deep, expectant silence that only power can create. You hear the king's steps before you ever see him. They are measured, deliberate. The pace of someone who knows the world moves to his rhythm. You don't look up. You're not meant to. The reflection of light shifts across the floor, the gold thread of his robe catching the faint glow of morning. The ritual begins. Someone announces the hour. Another adjusts the curtains, letting in a narrow stripe of pale sunlight that cuts across the chamber like a blade. Dust floats in it, soft and golden. You hold your breath as the procession of duties unfolds around you. The basin is lifted from your hands. Warm water is poured, tested, replaced. The towels are unfolded, offered, taken, replaced again. Each action happens with silent precision. Every motion an echo of those performed the day before, and the day before that, back through years so numerous that the beginning has been forgotten. The king's voice murmurs something indistinct, perhaps approval, perhaps nothing at all. The attendants respond with quiet agreement, a harmony of obedience so practiced it almost sounds beautiful. Perfume is dabbed on wrists, on collars, on the delicate lace of cuffs. The air grows heavy with fragrance, layered like the petals of a wilting flower. You breathe it in carefully, feeling it coat your tongue until it tastes faintly of sugar and decay. Someone sneezes softly, no one reacts. When it is time, the garments are brought forward, each one immaculate, each fold exact. You assist without speaking, holding out pieces of embroidered fabric that shimmer faintly in the light. The king's robes weigh more than you expect. Gold has a way of reminding the body of its cost. The sound of fabric sliding across skin is the only music. Somewhere outside, a harpsichord begins its morning tune, thin and distant. The melody seeps through the walls, like water through stone. It feels rehearsed, automatic, another part of the machinery that keeps the illusion intact. When the dressing ends, the air shifts again. The attendants step back, forming a quiet border around the space. You follow their lead, eyes lowered, hands folded, waiting for permission to fade into the background again. The king speaks a few words, small, formal, detached. You hear them, but do not process them. They move past you like the sound of wind through a narrow crack. His voice is neither cruel nor kind. It simply is, the sound of inevitability made human. He moves toward the door. The room seems to bend slightly around his passage, as if acknowledging the gravity that walks within it. You step aside, keeping your body small, your presence thinner than air. His robe brushes the edge of your sleeve, and for a moment you feel the texture of embroidered gold, rough, heavy, warm from the body that wears it. Then he's gone. The door closes, the echo fades. What remains is the smell, a mixture of incense, sweat and flowers that lingers in the air like the memory of a god. You exhale finally, careful not to make it sound like relief. The others begin to move again, restoring the order that ritual leaves behind. Towels are gathered, water is poured out, candles are replaced. The quiet returns, not as peace but as protocol. You carry the empty basin down the narrow stairway, the metal cool against your skin. The echo of your footsteps feels distant, almost detached from the rest of you. The day has only just begun, yet you already feel the familiar weight behind your eyes, that slow, dull ache that comes from being useful without being seen. The kitchens are alive now. You can hear the muffled clatter of pans, the sizzle of early fires, the voices of cooks, already arguing in whispers about portions and timing. Steam drifts through the cracks in the door, thick with the smell of broth and boiling herbs. You walk past without stopping. Through another corridor, you glimpse the courtyard. Servants cross in all directions, carrying trays, linens, firewood, each one moving quickly but quietly, as if chased by the idea of failure. The sky above is pale and smooth, drained of colour. You notice how even the air seems to move in rhythm with the palace's demands. You turn a corner, entering a smaller passage where no sunlight reaches. The candles burn low, their flames thin and uncertain. The walls sweat faintly with moisture, and the floor carries the cold up through your shoes. You can hear the distant murmur of courtiers now, voices like silk sliding over marble. Your next task waits beyond these walls, another room, another ritual. You know it without needing to be told. The palace runs on routine, the way the heart runs on blood. To stop is to die, and neither has any reason to rest. You pause for a moment in the shadow of the archway. The basin still drips slightly, a single thread of water tracing down your wrist before falling to the floor. It lands with a sound so small it could be mistaken for breathing. You look ahead, the long hall leading toward the galleries, where light will soon spill across the mirrors. You start walking again, steps steady, eyes down, hands steady. The rhythm of the palace resumes its slow, mechanical hum, and you move within it as though born from it. Somewhere above, the king has begun his day. Somewhere below, you continue his reflection. The machinery turns and you turn with it. You move through the stillness of morning as though it has no edge. The corridors no longer echo. They hum faintly, with the weight of things unspoken. Footsteps, prayers, exhaustion. The palace seems to exhale in rhythm with you. You've learned to breathe in its pattern, slow and shallow, careful not to disturb the air that belongs to others. The chandeliers above you hang like frozen rain, every droplet of glass catching the faintest blush of dawn. Somewhere behind you, a door clicks open, one of the valets perhaps, carrying linens or chamber pots, but the sound is soft, respectful. Everyone moves carefully at this hour. You've seen what happens when someone doesn't. You reach for the candle tray. 30 slender sticks of wax, all trimmed to the same height, their wicks cut precisely, as if they too have learned to obey. The wax is cool beneath your fingers, smooth and faintly greasy. When you lift one to your nose, the scent is heavy with honey and something floral, like a memory of a summer that doesn't belong to you. You strike flint to steel, and the first spark trembles into being. A bright pulse, then surrender. The wick catches, and the flame blooms upward, quiet and eager, as if it's relieved to be alive. You carry the tray carefully through the hall of mirrors. The glass stares back, thousands of versions of yourself in the same dull uniform, the same lowered gaze. The light multiplies endlessly until it feels like the air itself is made of reflection. For a moment, you wonder if the mirrors remember what they've seen. The masked balls, the courtiers dripping in silk and arrogance, the slow procession of time measured not in years but in ceremonies. You imagine the glass growing tired, the silver beneath it sighing quietly from the burden of witnessing too much splendor. You set the first candle into its holder just beside a marble bust of Apollo. His stone eyes watch you, indifferent, perfect, unblinking. You light the flame beneath his chin, and the wax begins to melt in a thin golden stream, pooling at the base like a slow offering. The scent rises, faint honey, smoke, the ghost of bees that once lived in the king's fields. Perfume drifts through the corridors soon after. Not from you, never from you, but from the king's chambers down the hall. It seeps out like fog, blending with the candle smoke, until the air becomes thick enough to taste. You recognize it instantly. Ambergris and orange blossom, the fragrance of authority. It clings to everything. The curtains, the silver, the breath of anyone who walks too near. You inhale carefully, trying to find something human beneath it, but there's nothing. Just luxury pretending to be air. As you move deeper into the palace, the scents layer themselves like music. The beeswax of polished floors, the damp musk of velvet that's been handled too many times, the faint bitterness of extinguished candles that died too early. Every smell tells a story, one of labour hidden beneath ceremony. You think of the maids who mix the perfumes, their fingers raw from grinding petals into paste, the boys who scrape wax from holders until their nails split, the laundresses who wash sheets, steeped in sweat and perfume, and never see the beds they serve. The king's scent is not his alone. It is built from hundreds of invisible bodies. You pause near a window, watching a ray of light move across the parquet floor. Dust floats lazily, each speck glowing like a tiny star. It looks beautiful, though you know it's made of ash and skin. The palace consumes itself slowly, every breath, every flicker, every step feeding into the endless cycle of decay, disguised as beauty. A bell rings somewhere far off, muffled but precise. Another signal in the great mechanism of the day. You know its meaning without thinking. The Queen's attendants have begun their work. Soon the perfumes will multiply, mingling into a cloud thick enough to make you dizzy. You remember once fainting in a corridor, the world turning syrupy and slow. When you awoke, no one had noticed. The marble beneath you had kept its chill, indifferent to your collapse. You wiped your palms on your apron and went back to lighting candles. You reach for another taper. The flame licks your fingers as you pass it from one holder to the next. The pain is small and clean, almost welcome, a reminder that you're still made of something warmer than stone. You don't flinch. You've learned that sudden movement draws eyes. Instead, you hold the candle steady, watching the wax drip like slow tears. The scent thickens as the day edges closer to noon. You can feel it coating your throat, sweet and cloying. You've heard some servants call it Versailles fever, the headache that never quite leaves, the nausea that comes from breathing too much wealth. Some laugh when they say it, but not kindly. You sometimes imagine what the palace would smell like if the perfume was stripped away. Just the raw odour of people, of life, sweat, wood, damp linen, spoiled food, smoke. It would be honest. Too honest, perhaps, for a king who wishes to be the sun. You stop beside a table where a vase of lilies droops slightly. The petals are too large, their white too perfect. Their scent is heavy, almost funereal. You adjust them out of habit, though you know no one will notice. That's the strange thing about beauty here. It requires endless tending, and yet the hands that tend it must remain invisible. Somewhere nearby, a musician tests a harpsichord key. The note floats through the air like a sigh, pure trembling, unfinished. You pause to listen, and for a heartbeat, the palace feels almost alive. The sound lingers, brushing against the hum of candles, the distant footsteps, the quiet breath of those like you who work in silence. Then it fades, leaving only the faint hiss of wax. You move again, always moving. The candles need tending. The wax must never pull too high. Every flame, every surface, every scent, all must be perfect before the day ends. The rules are not written anywhere, but they live in your body now, stitched into your movements. By the time you finish, the air is thick with perfume and gold light. The wax has softened into gleaming puddles, reflecting the chandeliers like liquid mirrors. You stand still, letting the heat press against your face. Somewhere beyond the walls, birds sing faintly, a reminder that the world outside still follows its own rhythm, unbothered by kings or rituals. You take a slow breath, and for a moment you imagine the scent of beeswax, turning back into the sound of hives, the perfume dissolving into wind, the wax unmelting, the palace exhaling, and finally sleeping. But it never does. Versailles does not sleep. It only burns slower, and you, candle still in hand, move on toward the next quiet task waiting for you in the shimmer of gold. The air feels thicker now. Perfume lingers like a veil that refuses to lift, and the scent of wax still clings to your fingers as you move. Your footsteps glide quietly over marble that looks too polished to belong to anyone mortal. The gold leaf on the walls gleams faintly, as if it has learned how to glow on its own. The morning has settled into its rhythm, that slow, practiced heartbeat of the palace, where even silence seems rehearsed. You walk through it, part of the machinery that keeps it breathing, though no one would notice if you stopped. The faint hiss of candles trails behind you, and the hem of your uniform whispers softly against the floor. It's a sound you've come to know like your own pulse. Ahead, the great doors of the Hall of Mirrors stand open. Light pours through them, fractured and shimmering, as though the sun itself has been broken into pieces and arranged along the walls. You pause before stepping inside, because you always do. There is something about this place, a weight that settles quietly on the back of your neck, a hum that seeps into your bones. It isn't reverence. It's more like exhaustion dressed as awe. The mirrors stretch endlessly along both sides, each one rimmed in gold so bright it almost hurts to look at. Between them, chandeliers hang like frozen constellations, their crystal pendants motionless in the still air. You move forward slowly, your reflection walking beside you in perfect silence. You don't look up often, but here it's impossible not to. The ceiling soars far above, covered in painted clouds and gods with perfect limbs. They seem to float on the light itself, frozen mid-command. You wonder if they too feel tired of being looked at. You light a candle near one of the gilded pillars, watching the flame shiver in the reflection. It splits itself endlessly, a single spark multiplied until it becomes a sea of light. You see yourself repeated again and again, a servant surrounded by copies of the same quiet posture. You try to focus on one reflection, but they all move with you, and for a moment you feel dizzy, as if the mirrors have stolen something small from you each time they caught your image. Every surface here demands care. You polish what no one sees, dust what never gathers dust, arrange what has never truly been out of place. There's comfort in the routine though, a rhythm to the meaningless. You know where each smudge will form before it does, where each faint fingerprint might dare to appear. You move through it like a ghost, trained to keep beauty alive. The hall smells faintly of iron beneath the perfume, the kind of smell you notice only when you're alone long enough to breathe deeply. The mirrors trap the scent of heat and polish, and the gold frames seem to sweat light. You wipe them with soft cloths, one hand steadying the glass as if you might fall into it. Outside the tall windows, the gardens of Versailles stretch endlessly, trimmed and sculpted into impossible geometry. You can't hear them, but you can imagine the gardeners at work, their shovels and shears clicking like distant metronomes. Even the earth here is arranged into symmetry. Every leaf obeys. You glance toward one of the mirrors again, and for a brief second you catch your own face, softened by candlelight, smudged by reflection. The lines under your eyes look deeper than you remember. You try to straighten your posture, but the reflection doesn't improve. You look like someone who has been standing too long, someone who has learned to disappear politely. You think of how many people have walked this hallway. Courtiers with powdered faces, noblewomen in rustling skirts, ambassadors from places you'll never see. They glide through, and their laughter echoes long after they're gone. The mirrors hold all of it, but never the names. Just gestures, smiles, silk, the shape of passing vanity. Sometimes when the hall is empty and you're left alone with the quiet, you imagine the reflections whispering to each other. Thousands of trapped moments flickering faintly against the glass, the rustle of a gown, the clink of a shoe buckle. A sigh. You think the mirrors must be tired of repetition, of seeing the same poses dressed in different perfume. But then, again, perhaps they've grown numb, like everyone else here. The sun shifts slowly, its light crawling across the mirrors until it blinds the centre of the room. You look down to avoid it, but the floor reflects too, the marble polished so perfectly that it becomes a mirror in itself. For a heartbeat, you're surrounded by reflections from every side, floating between glass and gold, nowhere to rest your eyes. The air hums faintly, with the weight of music drifting from another chamber. Strings and flutes, delicate and distant. You can't tell if someone is rehearsing or if the melody simply never stopped. The notes wrap around you like mist, and your movements fall into rhythm with them. Dusting, straightening, breathing. You realize that everything here moves to the same unseen tempo, from the servants to the courtiers to the king himself. The gilded hallway isn't meant for you, but you belong to it all the same. Your footsteps fade into the marble. Your reflection folds neatly among the thousands of others. You have become part of the furniture. Not out of punishment, but from habit. You wipe one last section of glass, and your own reflection bends, distorted by a flaw in the silvering. For a moment, your face blurs into the background, half servant, half ghost, and it feels strangely right. You were never meant to be seen clearly here. Clarity belongs to the king. The air grows warmer as more candles burn low. The wax softens and drips down their sides, forming pale ridges like miniature landscapes. You watch it harden again, sealing time in layers. Somewhere in the reflection, the gold flickers like a heartbeat. You turn your gaze toward the far end of the hall. Beyond the last mirror, a door stands slightly ajar, revealing a glimpse of another corridor, dim and narrow. That's where you'll go next, where the walls are plainer, the light softer, the world smaller. But for now, you linger. You let your fingers brush against the smooth marble, cool despite the heat of the candles. You take one last look at the mirrored expanse, at the infinite corridors of light and repetition, and it feels like standing inside a memory that isn't yours, a memory too polished to hold real life. You think about how strange it is to live among so much beauty and still feel invisible. But invisibility is safety here. Reflection is privilege. The music fades again, leaving only the faint crackle of candle wicks and the whisper of air slipping between the gilded frames. You walk quietly toward the end of the hall, careful not to let your steps echo too loudly. The sound feels like it might wake the glass. When you pass through the doorway, the light dims. The marble gives way to darker stone, the gold to shadow. The scent of perfume fades, replaced by something colder, more real. The smell of damp linen, iron hinges, and sleep not yet had. You exhale slowly, as if the palace itself might hear you. The sound disappears into the walls, absorbed like everything else. You move on, candle in hand, down the quieter passage where the mirrors no longer follow you, where gold gives way to dust and the night begins to breathe again. The corridor narrows until the gold fades entirely, swallowed by the practical world that hides beneath the palace's shimmer. The light here is dull, the air thick with the scent of smoke and broth and iron. It's cooler, quieter in a different way, not the silence of reverence, but of constant motion muffled by walls. You follow the hum of the kitchens, the low thud of cleavers, the murmur of orders. The sound grows louder with every step until it surrounds you, a kind of heartbeat for the palace itself. If the mirrored halls are the lungs, this is the stomach, always working, never seen. When you step inside, the heat hits like a wall. The air tastes of salt, of fire, of sweet rot. Flames leap beneath blackened pots, and the smell of roasting meat fills every breath. The cooks move like clockwork, a choreography of knives, ladles, and bare hands hardened by burns. They shout, but no one really listens. The noise overlaps until words become rhythm. You carry your tray through it all, careful not to disturb the order that isn't truly orderly. On one side, a boy no older than 12 plucks feathers from a bird with mechanical precision. They fall like snow, soft and white, against the greasy tiles. Beside him, a woman stirs something thick and brown in a copper pot, its surface bubbling with slow, deliberate malice. The scent is almost sweet, but not enough to hide the bitterness underneath. Further in, the ovens roar like animals. You pass one open door and catch sight of a roast swan, its skin lacquered, glistening under heat, the neck elegantly curved as if the creature was still alive. Its eyes are gone, replaced with small black olives, polished and cruel. The smell turns your stomach before you can admire it. Another tray waits near the long table, this one piled high with sugared fruit, pears, plums, figs, all dusted in crystals that catch the firelight. They gleam as if they've been frozen mid-decay, beauty embalmed in sweetness. You've never tasted one. You've been told not to. The sweetness is not for you. It belongs to those who never see the hands that carried it. You balance the tray carefully. Your fingers burn slightly where the metal's heat seeps through. You don't wince. You can't afford to drop anything in this room. The last servant who did still works here, but his hands shake now. The kitchen is a world apart. No gold, no mirrors, only sweat and steam. The air is alive with small violences. The crack of bone, the hiss of fat, the scrape of metal against stone. It's strange how these sounds can feel more honest than the music that floats through the salons above. Here, everything has purpose. Every movement feeds something greater, even if it ends in waste. You pause beside a row of pies cooling on the sill. Their crusts glisten, with egg wash, perfect and golden. The smell is almost unbearable. Spiced apples, cloves, butter melting into pastry. You look at them the way one might look at a painting, something too perfect to touch. You imagine taking a piece, just a crumb. You wouldn't be the first, you wouldn't be caught. But the thought alone feels like treason. Someone shouts your name, you flinch and lift the tray again. It's time to deliver. You weave through the crowd, each turn practiced, every motion calculated. You've learned how to move through chaos quietly, the art of existing without interrupting. The kitchen door opens to a small passage that climbs upward, curving like a spine toward the dining rooms above. The change in air is immediate. The heat begins to fade, replaced by a perfumed chill. The sounds grow distant, as if the kitchen were sinking underwater behind you. Only the echo of cutlery remains, faint and rhythmic, like laughter pressed between glass. You walk carefully, the tray steady in your hands. The scent of roasted meat follows you, clinging to your sleeves. By the time you reach the top of the stairs, you can already hear the hum of conversation, that strange theatrical murmur of nobility, pretending not to be hungry. Through the half-open door, you glimpse the table, endless, white, and shining. The plates gleam like moons. The crystal catches every flicker of candlelight. Servants like you drift in silence, refilling glasses, trading trays, vanishing before anyone remembers their faces. You're one of them, a shadow carrying offerings. You set the tray on a sideboard, replacing an empty platter with a full one. Your reflection trembles faintly in the silver dome. You lower your gaze, but in that brief moment, you see the faces across the room, powdered, painted, soft with boredom. Their laughter drifts like smoke. They eat slowly, as if chewing were beneath them. You move closer to the table when called, your eyes fixed on the napkin in your hand. Someone asks for more sauce. Another demands a different wine. You nod without looking up. The voices blur together until they're only sound, layered and distant, like water running over stones. A piece of fruit slips from a plate, rolling under the tablecloth near your foot. A candied fig. You freeze for a heartbeat, watching it glisten in the light. No one notices. You could take it, you think. Just one. But you don't. You bend, retrieve it carefully, place it back on the platter, untouched. The gesture feels heavier than it should. The laughter rises again. Forks clink. The air smells of roasted sugar, of butter melting into silver bowls. You stand near the wall, invisible among the others, and listen to the ritual of eating. It's not hunger they satisfy here, but power, the performance of abundance. Every bite taken is a declaration. There is enough for us and not for you. The king sits at the head of the table, radiant even when motionless. His expression is unreadable, composed in the way portraits are. Around him, courtiers murmur flatteries, disguised as observations. You've never been close enough to truly see his eyes, but you imagine they reflect the same light as the mirrors in the hallway, beautiful, distant, incapable of warmth. The musicians play softly in the corner, strings brushing the air like silk. The sound is gentle enough to lull the diners into a kind of trance. You can feel your own breathing fall into the same rhythm. You wonder if they notice how still the servants become, how carefully you stand, as though any sudden breath might fracture the illusion. After a while, the feast begins to fade. Plates empty, laughter softens. The air grows heavier with heat and perfume. You collect dishes one by one, stacking them carefully, the remains of food glistening like discarded jewels. You look down at a half-eaten tart, the crust broken, the filling still steaming faintly, and you can almost taste it without touching it. The sweetness clings to the air like regret. When the room finally empties, you and the others move in silence, clearing what's left. You carry trays of bones and crumbs, the gold platters streaked with sauce. The smell of roasted swan clings to you still, richer now, spoiled by proximity. Back in the corridor, the noise fades to a murmur again. The door closes behind you, sealing the laughter away. The air feels cooler, emptier. You walk slowly, the echo of clinking glasses still ghosting through your head. The feast will happen again tomorrow. The food will shine, the laughter will rise, and you will carry it all, unseen, unfed, unmentioned. The scent of sugar still follows you as you descend toward the quieter halls, where candlelight softens and the marble grows pale again. Somewhere above, the music continues, faint and unreachable. You breathe in the sweetness once more, careful not to taste it, and keep walking through the long, endless appetite of the palace. The air outside feels heavier, though it carries the promise of freedom. You pass beneath the marble archway and into the open, where the scent of roasted fat fades into something cleaner. Trimmed hedges, wet stone, and the faint sweetness of damp earth. It's the kind of air that pretends to be fresh, but even here, you can feel the hand of the palace shaping it. The gardens stretch endlessly before you, so perfect they almost look painted. Straight lines, precise angles, each tree standing where mathematics decided it should. The sky is pale, washed in thin sunlight that glints off fountains and marble statues. You take a slow breath and step onto the gravel path. The crunch beneath your shoes is the first honest sound you've heard all day. Everywhere around you, symmetry rules. The fountains are placed like punctuation marks in a sentence written by a god obsessed with order. You can see the palace reflected in each basin, that endless facade of gold and glass, and it feels as if the building is watching you from every direction. The fountains hiss and murmur, their water moving in rehearsed rhythm. They breathe when the palace breathes. They sleep when it sleeps. You walk toward one of them, watching the arc of water rise and fall. The droplets shimmer in the air before vanishing into the pool below. The sound is soft, steady, a heartbeat made of water. You dip your fingers in. It's colder than it should be. Somewhere beneath the surface, the pipes sigh, carrying water from far-off rivers, bent and shaped to serve beauty. You wonder how many men it took to keep this illusion alive, to open the valves, clear the algae, polish the marble lips of the fountains. You never see them during the day. Their work happens before dawn, like yours. Invisible hands maintaining the illusion that perfection simply exists on its own. A breeze moves through the rows of trees, but even the wind seems rehearsed here. It travels in straight lines, parting the leaves evenly. You glance upward, where branches have been trimmed into precise cubes. Not a single leaf dares to fall out of place. You think of the king when you look at these trees. Their beauty so controlled it feels cruel. Even nature bows here. Far ahead, the great canal glimmers like a blade drawn through the landscape. You've carried pitchers of wine there before, for royal outings. You remember the stillness of the water, how even the ripples seemed to know their limits. The air then was filled with laughter that didn't quite reach you, voices softened by distance. Now the canal is empty, only the reflection of the sky moves on its surface. You walk beside it, your footsteps echoing faintly. The gravel crunches in a rhythm that feels almost like counting. You've heard that the king himself used to walk these paths at dawn, measuring the world with his gaze, timing the fountains to match his steps. They called it the garden clock. Every valve opened and closed according to his presence. The gardens moved with him, like a great mechanical body powered by devotion. You pause near a statue, a figure of Apollo, gleaming white against the green. His face is smooth, eternal, expressionless. The sculptor caught him mid-motion, hair swept back, muscles tense, one hand lifted as if to bless or command. You look up at him and think of the stories whispered among the servants, that the king chose Apollo because he saw himself in the god's reflection, the Sun King, radiant and immortal, feeding on the orbit of others. A bee drifts lazily near your shoulder, humming with the same indifferent rhythm as everything else. You watch it land on a small patch of lavender, growing near the base of the statue. The only thing here that seems allowed to grow freely. The purple blooms sway gently, imperfect, alive. You linger on them longer than you should. The bells from the chapel begin to ring in the distance. Their sound rolls softly over the gardens, a slow toll that marks the next hour of the day. You count without meaning to. 1, 2, 3. Each note feels like a reminder. The palace is time itself, dividing your existence into small obedient pieces. You walk further, past hedges so tall they block the horizon. The paths twist, but never enough to surprise you. Every turn reveals another fountain, another statue, another display of control. Somewhere in the distance, gardeners move in quiet synchronization. Trimming, sweeping, never looking up. Their shears click rhythmically, like the ticking of a clock made from hands instead of gears. The sunlight grows warmer, gilding the statues in pale gold. You squint and see the faint shimmer of heat rising off the gravel. The smell of earth mixes with something floral, faint and artificial, the perfume drifting from the palace windows behind you. Even here, the scent follows. You can't escape it. It clings to the air like memory. You stop at the edge of the Parterre du Yeux, two vast pools reflecting the facade of Versailles so perfectly that it's hard to tell where the building ends and the water begins. The reflection trembles slightly, as if the palace is breathing through its mirrored skin. You stare into it, and for a moment it feels like you're looking down at another world, an inverted kingdom made of glass and sky, quieter, softer, maybe even kinder. A servant passes behind you, carrying a basket of folded linen. You nod slightly, but neither of you speaks. Words don't belong out here. They'd sound too human, too rough against the perfection. The fountains continue their song, steady, endless, unfeeling. You realize how easy it would be to mistake the sound for peace. Beyond the canal you can see the forest, wild, dark, uncut. It waits like a secret, the one place where symmetry fails. Sometimes, when the evenings are long, you imagine walking into it and never coming back. You trade the smell of perfume for soil, the echo of marble for the silence of trees. But the thought never lasts. The palace doesn't let go easily. Its rhythms cling to you, even in dreams. You glance back toward the palace, that impossible monument of light and labour. From this distance, it almost looks weightless. But you know how heavy it truly is. You've carried that weight in trays, in linens, in silence. Every window gleams with a kind of hunger, reflecting the world back at itself until nothing feels real. The breeze shifts again, and you hear the faintest creak of branches, a rare, imperfect sound. You breathe in deeply, and for the first time, it smells like something that hasn't been touched by command. The air tastes different here, honest, almost wild. You let it fill your lungs before it disappears, carried away by the rhythm of the fountains. The shadows begin to stretch across the gravel, the light thinning as the day moves forward. You start walking back, tracing the same symmetrical path. Each step feels rehearsed, though you never learned the choreography. The fountains continue to hiss behind you, steady as breath. They sound almost alive, almost human. As you approach the archway again, the perfume of the palace drifts back into reach, heavier, sweeter, suffocating. The air grows warmer, the sound of footsteps louder. You glance once more at the gardens, at their impossible stillness, and realize that even the trees are part of the performance. You step back into the shadow of the palace, where marble replaces earth, where time resumes its steady ticking. The door closes softly behind you, sealing the world outside like a memory. And though you've left the gardens, their rhythm lingers. The hiss of fountains, the hum of symmetry, beating quietly somewhere beneath your ribs, marking the hour as surely as the palace bells. The palace glows at noon. The sun at its highest leans against the walls of Versailles like a lover unwilling to leave. Its light spills through the countless windows, refracting across gold leaf, marble and mirrors, until everything looks as though it's made of fire. You move through it slowly, squinting, your hands clasped behind your back so you don't leave fingerprints on the gilded edges. Even light here has rules. The air hums, a soft unending murmur of silk, gossip and footsteps. Courtiers drift through the corridors like swans across a pond, each gesture measured, each smile a form of currency. You know their rhythms now, the way laughter always comes half a second too late, the way eyes glance sideways before lips do. It's a language of glances and masks, one you'll never fully be allowed to speak. You pause near a window. The glass burns under the touch of the sun, yet you can't look away. Beyond it, the gardens blaze in symmetrical light, so precise they look unreal, like a painting that forgot it's meant to move. The fountains you passed earlier now shimmer like threads of molten glass. From this angle, the world feels distant, suspended in a stillness, too perfect to be natural. Inside, the air smells faintly of roses, wax, and powdered wigs. The perfume lingers in layers, hiding the salt of sweat beneath it. You take a careful breath and adjust the lace at your cuff, though the gesture isn't yours to make habit maybe, or an echo of the people around you. It's strange how imitation becomes survival. A pair of courtiers glide past you, their voices soft, but sharpened at the edges. One is laughing about something you can't hear. The other nods with the hollow grace of someone accustomed to pretending. Their wigs gleam like spun sugar under the light, and for a brief moment the glass catches their reflections. Two figures moving in a hall that seems to go on forever. You look away before they see you. You continue walking, tray in hand, down the corridor that feels like it could bend time. Every few steps you catch your own reflection in the mirrors. It startles you each time. The small tired figure, caught between marble giants and painted gods. Your reflection blurs in the light, fading into the gold until it's barely human. You look like something the palace imagined, not something it owns. The noise of conversation thickens ahead. You follow it to the Hall of Mirrors, that impossible gallery where sunlight multiplies into infinity. It's brighter here than anywhere else in the world, a tunnel of glass where you can't tell whether you're walking through light or through memory. The chandeliers hang above like frozen stars, their crystals trembling faintly in the heat. You stop at the edge of the hall. Your footsteps echo against marble, too loud, too real. The courtiers here are scattered like jewels, each one positioned to be seen. A lady adjusting her fan, a nobleman leaning just enough to let the sunlight find his rings, their reflections stretch beside them, endless duplicates of performance. You watch them shimmer, wondering if they ever lose track of which version is real. A servant near the far wall spills a drop of wine onto the floor. It's a small thing, barely visible against the pattern of the marble, but the nearest lady in waiting sees it. Her mouth tightens. The servant bows, murmurs an apology, and vanishes through a side door as if erased. You watch unmoving. You've learned that survival here is not about speed, but silence. The sunlight shifts again. Now it hits you directly, hot, blinding. You close your eyes for a second. Behind your lids, the world remains gold. When you open them again, you catch your reflection once more, multiplied endlessly in every mirror. For a fleeting moment, you can't tell which one is you. Each reflection stands slightly out of sync. Heads tilted at wrong angles, eyes dimmer, movements slower. The palace seems to fracture around you, bending light into copies of obedience. Someone laughs nearby, sharp, like a blade cutting silk. The sound pulls you back. A nobleman, draped in blue velvet, is telling a story to a cluster of powdered faces. His gestures are wide, theatrical, meant to be seen. You recognize him, a count who once ordered you to fetch his gloves from his carriage and forgot to thank you when you did. His words float through the air, all charm and emptiness. The others respond with polite laughter that feels rehearsed, almost musical. You drift closer, unseen, setting a silver pitcher on a side table. Their laughter continues, but you notice the small cracks in it, the way their smiles tighten just before fading. The faint exhaustion beneath their painted eyes. They live for reflection, you realize, for the endless surface of admiration and envy. Beneath it all, they look as trapped as you feel. The chandeliers hum faintly above. The wax is melting faster now, droplets falling like slow tears. The air grows thick with warmth. You feel it pressing against your skin, making the lace at your collar damp. You glance again toward the mirrors, and this time you notice the sunlight bending through the glass like liquid fire. Each window blazes white. The reflections ripple slightly, alive, as though the palace itself were breathing. You take a slow step back. The light fills the hall until you can barely see. It hides the people, the gold, the marble, leaving only outlines, silhouettes suspended in brilliance. For a heartbeat it feels holy. Then it passes and everything sharpens again. The courtiers resume their motions. The laughter starts once more. The illusion repairs itself, as it always does. You slip out quietly, your shoes whispering against the floor. The corridor beyond feels dim after the brightness. The shadows cooler, almost kind. You pause beside a smaller window and rest your hand on the sill. The glass here is old, thicker, uneven. It warps the light, bending the garden beyond into strange shapes. Trees curve inward, fountains seem to flow uphill, the horizon ripples. You tilt your head, watching how the world changes when viewed through distortion. It almost looks honest that way. In the faint reflection of the glass, your face appears again, soft, uncertain, half-eaten by light. There's a smear of wax on your sleeve, a thin layer of dust on your cuff, details no one inside the mirrors will ever notice. You trace your finger against your reflection, and for a moment, it feels like touching someone else entirely. Outside, the sun continues its slow arc, dragging the shadows across the stone. The hour is slipping, you can feel it. Soon the calls will come again, trays to carry, linens to fold, footsteps to erase. But for now, you stay there, hand on the glass, feeling the faint warmth of the day pulsing through it. The palace hums behind you, the gardens shimmer beyond, and for once, you let yourself simply exist between the two. A whisper of movement breaks the moment, another servant passing by, her steps careful, her expression still. She nods to you, and you return it, no words, no acknowledgement of time. Just two ghosts, crossing paths in the reflection of someone else's paradise. You turn to follow the corridor deeper into the palace, where the light softens, and the air thickens with the scent of wax and perfume once more. The mirrors recede behind you, carrying your reflection with them. One more image swallowed by the glass, and as you walk, the sound of the hall fades, replaced by the distant ticking of unseen clocks. The rhythm of Versailles itself, marking every breath, every heartbeat, every shimmer of sunlight as it slides down. Walls of gold, the corridor breathes with heat and polish as you move through it, your shoes whispering against marble that never cools. Behind you, the reflections of the hall fade into soft light, the kind that settles only when the sun begins its slow descent, mellow and heavy. The hum of conversation has thinned, replaced by something gentler, something you can't quite name. Then, faintly, from somewhere distant in the maze of rooms and galleries, you hear it, a harpsichord. The first note arrives like a drop of glass, clear and fragile. Then another, then more, the melody unfolding with precise indifference, as though it doesn't care whether anyone is listening. You pause near a column, head tilted, trying to find its source, but the sound has no direction. It fills the air without belonging to it. You've heard the same tune countless times before. Every day, it seems to thread itself through the palace, weaving into the clatter of dishes, the rustle of gowns, the soft tap of heels against marble. Always the same pattern of notes, always slightly off, like a dream remembered wrong. You suspect that even silence here carries rhythm. The palace, after all, was built to perform. You walk toward the music. The air grows cooler, shadows pooling in corners where gold fades to grey. A tapestry hangs nearby, its threads dulled by candle soot. A myth stitched in silk, full of gods and battles no one remembers clearly. As you pass, the faces in it seem to watch you, their woven eyes following in stillness. The music continues, a little louder now, echoing through the emptiness between steps. You reach one of the smaller salons, an oval chamber gilded from floor to ceiling, every inch designed to reflect light and sound back upon itself. A musician sits near the far wall, dressed in soft browns and pale lace, her hands moving like clockwork across the harpsichord keys. You stay in the doorway. Servants don't belong to moments like these. The melody ripples outward, thin and mechanical. It isn't joy or sorrow, only precision. Every note lands exactly where it should, and that is its tragedy. You watch her play, and you think of how sound becomes architecture here, how each chord reinforces the illusion that this place is alive. Two courtiers stand nearby, murmuring about nothing. Their laughter punctuates the music like a metronome. One fans herself slowly, not from heat, but from habit. The fan opens and closes with the rhythm of a sigh. You wonder if they even hear the music anymore, or if it's simply part of the air, like perfume and expectation. The harpsichord continues. Its tone is thin, metallic, like sunlight filtered through dust. Every so often, the melody stumbles, one key sharper than it should be. The imperfection lingers for half a breath before the rhythm corrects itself. You find yourself waiting for those small fractures, tiny reminders that there is still a person beneath all this precision. You stand in the doorway longer than you mean to. Time in Versailles doesn't move. It accumulates. Each note falls into the next, building a tower of repetition. You can almost feel the years pressing down, the days stacked like invisible sheets of parchment. Somewhere deep in the palace, someone is always playing something. Flutes, viols, lutes, voices rising in trained elegance. The air carries sound like blood carries breath. You turn to leave, but the corridor draws you deeper. The music follows, softening as you move, dissolving into the hum of unseen machinery. Kitchens, footsteps, murmured orders, the endless breathing of the palace itself. You think of how many lives must keep moving to keep this illusion alive. Hands polishing, sweeping, arranging, folding. Every gesture, a note. Every sigh, a measure. Further along, a window is open, just enough to let in a current of warm air. It carries the distant scent of roses and something sharper, oil from torches being lit for evening. You lean slightly toward it, listening. Outside, the faint sound of another melody drifts from the gardens. Violins this time. Carried across trimmed hedges and gravel paths, two songs overlapping. One inside, one out. Neither aware of the other. It occurs to you that music here never really ends. It only changes rooms. You step onto a narrow landing, the marble stairs descending into shadow. Somewhere below, servants are preparing for supper, voices blending with the scrape of silverware and the soft ring of plates. You hear laughter, tired, unguarded, quickly swallowed by the walls. The harpsichord melody threads through it all, like a ghost refusing to rest. At the bottom of the stairs, you pass a chamber where candles are being replaced. The air smells of melted wax and linen smoke. One of the boys humming to himself as he trims the wicks, off-key, unashamed. You pause. His tune is a fragment of the same melody. He doesn't realize it, but he's echoing the harpsichord above. The palace has taught him its music without words. You move on. Through the arches, a faint golden light spills from the king's apartments, the place where the real music originates, where orchestras play, while men eat swan and talk about war as though it were sport. You won't see that room tonight. You never do. But the echoes reach you all the same. The marble carries them faithfully, just as it carries your footsteps, your breath, your fatigue. Versailles doesn't distinguish between sounds. It collects them all. You pause at a corner where two corridors meet. The walls are lined with portraits, faces long dead but perfectly maintained, each frozen in a quiet vanity. You can almost hear the faint creak of their painted silence. In the dim light, one of the figures seems to be holding a violin. Its strings glimmer faintly, catching the last trace of sun from the window. You wonder if the musician who painted it could still recognize the song being played here, centuries later, or if the palace has erased even that. The harpsichord continues, steady, relentless. The same passage repeats again and again. You start to notice the tiny spaces between notes, the way air folds inward just before a sound appears. The emptiness becomes more real than the melody. You imagine the entire building breathing in rhythm, every candle flicker, every curtain sway, every footstep synchronizing to a single, invisible pulse. Somewhere nearby, a clock strikes the hour. The sound doesn't interrupt the music. It joins it, slipping perfectly into its rhythm. The line between instrument and architecture dissolves completely. You stand very still, listening. The music swells, faintly distorted now, stretched thin by distance and stone. Then silence. For a moment the world holds its breath. The harpsichord stops. The air doesn't know what to do with itself. You wait, almost afraid to move, certain the sound will return. And it does, a single hesitant note, followed by another, as if the palace itself had restarted its heart. You exhale. When you finally turn away, the melody trails after you, lighter, softer, like dust following a sunbeam. You realize you no longer know where the sound ends and where your thoughts begin. Maybe that's what Versailles does best. It teaches you to echo until you forget you had a voice of your own. The corridor opens into a small vestibule lined with mirrors. You see yourself there again, reflected from 100 angles, each one slightly delayed. Behind your image, faint and translucent, are the flickering candle flames, moving to the same rhythm as the unseen harpsichord. The palace hums quietly through them all, and as you stand there, surrounded by soft gold and still air, you realize that nothing here ever truly stops. Not music, not motion, not time. Even silence is just another instrument, waiting for its turn to play. The corridor narrows and cools as you leave the faint echo of music behind. Your footsteps are quieter here, swallowed by layers of carpet and time. A tray rests in your hands, but the weight is familiar, hollowed by repetition, shaped by years of obedience. You pause at the carved door of a noblewoman's chamber, letting your hand hover over the handle. Even this small act requires attention. The door must be opened softly, without announcing your presence. The palace teaches these habits, as if survival depended on them, and in truth it does. Inside, the chamber smells of lavender and stale perfume, a sweetness half cancelled by the musty air of closed windows. Sunlight falls through high panes, striking the floor in pale rectangles that warm the dust motes floating in lazy patterns. You bend to brush your hand along a velvet chair, the fibres releasing faint clouds of grey. Each movement sets more dust in motion, small clouds that drift and settle like memories. The silk curtains billow slightly where the window is cracked, revealing the trimmed garden beyond. Light plays over the folds of fabric, catching threads of gold and pearl. Beneath them, the carpet is thick, but not enough to hide what has been accumulating for decades, a layer of dust that refuses to obey the polished grandeur of the room. You sweep slowly, methodically, each pass brushing invisible histories aside, small fragments of lives forgotten before they were lived. You notice the dressing table, its mirror catching the sunlight. Jewellery sparkles there, arranged with the precision of an altar. Rings, necklaces, and combs gleam, though each has already been touched by the hands of someone else. You wipe the surface carefully, smearing fingerprints from previous cleaning attempts, from previous servants, from people who believe themselves important. The mirrors reflect all of this with serene indifference. The room does not care who polished what, who served or who obeyed. It only waits, eternal, for the next breath of labour to pass through it. Your hand drifts over a silver tray left on the table. A small bottle of perfume, a brush, a powder box. Each object seems to hum quietly, recalling rituals you have performed countless times. You imagine the noblewoman lifting the powder brush, dabbing her cheeks with it, never pausing to wonder about the person who ensured the surface was spotless. You almost laugh, the sound swallowed by the silence of the room. In the palace, it is considered ordinary to be invisible. To serve without acknowledgement is a small miracle, a quiet obedience stitched into every fibre of your being. Beneath the silk, the dust is heavier than you expect. It clings to the folds of the curtains, pressing into the threads of rugs, settling beneath the legs of chairs like a subtle confession. You run your hand along the hem of a gown discarded on a chaise longue. The fabric gleams in sunlight, rich and smooth, but underneath is the same quiet decay. Dust gathers, inevitable, patient. You think about how everything golden eventually dulls, how even the finest silk cannot resist gravity and time. The palace itself feels like silk, stretched over centuries, hiding the dust beneath its elegance. You sweep it as if obedience could erase the passing of years. Though you know better, dust is honesty. It cannot be hidden completely. It merely waits for someone to brush it aside long enough to imagine perfection. A faint sound reaches you, the distant tap of a heel in a corridor, a low murmur of conversation, the soft crackle of a candle somewhere beyond the door. The noblewoman herself does not enter yet, and in the waiting, the room seems to exhale. The mirrors multiply the sunlight, scattering it across the walls, and for a moment the dust sparkles like a constellation of forgotten stars. You pause to watch it, almost mesmerized. The floorboards beneath your feet are warm, sun-warmed from the afternoon light filtering in. Each one creaks with quiet protest as you shift your weight, a reminder that even polished surfaces are fragile. You kneel, brushing beneath the furniture, careful to avoid the ornate carvings on the legs of tables and chairs. The dust collects there in deeper layers, almost tactile in its insistence. You run your fingers through it, imagining the centuries of small hands that have performed the same task. Each of you a ghost following the same invisible rhythm, leaving almost nothing behind. A gown flutters gently near the open window, the silk catching the breeze. You brush it aside with care, knowing it will be worn again, handled by someone who will never notice. The labour that preserves it. The threads glint in the sunlight, a soft defiance against time. And yet beneath, the dust remains, silent and patient, proof that all things, no matter how polished, how adored, eventually gather traces of imperfection. You move toward the writing desk, its surface polished until it almost reflects the room. Ink bottles, quills, folded letters, each carefully arranged. You wipe along the edges, collecting the fine grey particles that hint at years of neglect hidden beneath ceremony. For a moment, you think about the hand that wrote those letters, about the words meant to impress, to convey power. The dust remembers more than the words themselves. It recalls presence and absence, intention and neglect. Beneath the gold frame of a portrait, a small pile of dust clings to the corner. You brush it lightly, almost reverently. The subject of the painting, a lady who never knew you, stares out with painted eyes that cannot see, and still the dust persists. It is more honest than any gaze, more enduring than any gilded frame. You pause near the window, letting sunlight wash over your hands, dust rising in tiny motes that sparkle faintly. Outside, the gardens stretch in their eternal precision, trimmed and obedient. Inside, the room waits, static, perfect, alive with the quiet evidence of decay. You think about how little of your labour is ever seen, how your presence is registered only in absence, in the lack of dust, in the unbroken lines of silk, in surfaces polished smooth enough to reflect someone else's face. You almost smile at the honesty of it all. The afternoon wears on. You continue through the chamber, brushing, dusting, straightening. Each gesture blends with the next, indistinguishable from the last. Time in Versailles does not rush. It accumulates like the dust itself, layer upon layer, until you can no longer tell how long you have been in this room, how long the palace has existed, how long your hands have been moving in quiet repetition. You straighten one last tray of silver, inspecting each piece until it gleams. The mirrors reflect the work faithfully, magnifying the perfection while hiding the weariness of your hands. The sunlight shifts again, scattering across the chamber and igniting the smallest particles of dust into glittering constellations. You pause, mesmerized, and allow yourself a brief thought that beauty and decay can coexist in silence. that no one needs to witness it for it to be real. As you step back toward the door, leaving the chamber behind, the silk curtains stir once more, lifted by a faint breeze. Dust motes dance in the light one final time before settling. You close the door softly, the sound swallowed immediately by the corridor. The room now looks untouched, perfect to anyone who enters. The truth, hidden beneath layers of silk and labour, waits quietly for the next touch of hands like yours. And you move on, your reflection in the polished marble of the hallway, catching your gaze. You see the dust clinging to your own sleeves, unnoticed, unremarked. It is a reminder of all that has passed through your hands and all that will return in your absence. The palace carries on, magnificent and eternal, its beauty a surface beneath which time and decay whisper truths no one is meant to hear. The corridor stretches before you, long and shadowed, its marble walls swallowing sound as if it had no business lingering. You step lightly, careful to keep your presence inconspicuous. The palace breathes around you, not in gusts but in a steady, endless murmur. Doors creaking softly, silks brushing against polished floors, candles sputtering in the slow heat everywhere. Whispers curl like smoke, wrapping themselves around corners and hanging in the air long after their owners have moved on. You pass one of the gilded doors, the faintest vibration of conversation slipping through its cracks. Names you do not know, favours you will never be offered, betrayals you are too small to witness. Each syllable carries the weight of consequence, yet none of it touches you. You glide past, broom in hand, as though you are air itself, invisible and necessary only for the upkeep of the hall. The palace has a rhythm, and you are a metronome beating quietly against it. A gentleman's voice rises, low and measured, speaking of alliances and debts. You catch the scrape of a chair against marble, and the soft sigh of a woman drawing a fan across her face. Their words are polished, rehearsed, ritual, not speech. Power has a smell here, thick, oily, a mixture of sweat, perfume and expectation. You inhale it reluctantly, letting it settle in your chest before exhaling slowly. The sound of your own footsteps is muffled against rugs that have long lost their colour to sun and footfall. Dust clings stubbornly to the corners of the hallway, unnoticed, permanent, patient. You brush it aside mechanically, small clouds rising to catch the light like faint spectres. Each sweep reminds you that you are both part of this place and apart from it, present, yet unseen. You pause at a doorway where the murmur swells into argument. Not loud, never loud. This palace does not tolerate overt displays. Subtlety is the language of influence. You hear the faint sting of accusation in a noblewoman's tone, the soft chuckle of a man masking satisfaction. You imagine the tension hanging between them, like fine silk stretched over iron. And you know your hand, empty, will touch nothing. You are only a witness, the invisible observer of performances that consume everyone else. The walls themselves seem to lean in, carrying conversations from room to room. You've walked these halls for months, years even, and can sense the energy that hangs beneath the polished surfaces. A sort of low hum, a quiet pulse of ambition. It courses through the carpets, trembles in the chandeliers, and hums faintly through the mirrors. You move through it as naturally as you breathe, broom in hand, dust rising softly in the patches of sunlight that penetrate the high windows. A door opens ahead, just enough for the scent of jasmine to escape. Someone enters in a flurry of rustling skirts, moving fast, speaking faster, leaving a trail of words you can't catch. They vanish into another room, but their presence lingers like a faint perfume, sweet and sharp at once. You brush along the base of the wall, your fingers grazing the carvings, following the trail of absence. Everything in the palace carries evidence. Even moments that seem to vanish are preserved in echoes. You turn down a narrower corridor where the air feels heavier, filled with the faint metallic tang of ink and candle smoke. Behind closed doors, you can hear the faint scratching of quills. The shuffle of parchment words are being weighed and measured here, promises written and erased before anyone else can know them. You walk past, careful not to stumble, letting the faint vibrations pass through you. You are a keeper of silence, a channel for the unspoken. The palace itself seems alive here, moving beneath the weight of so many secrets. The whispers bend around corners, slip under doors, drift down halls, forming an invisible tide that never rests. You can feel it brushing against your arms, your back, your hair, as if the building itself were aware of every step you take. You pause for a moment, hand resting lightly on the handle of a door that is firmly closed, and listen. The sound of whispered names, of soft laughter and restrained sighs is constant. It carries without destination, flowing past you like air through a channel. In one room, a woman is laughing softly, her voice sharp and practiced. You catch only fragments, a compliment, a warning, a name that rolls off the tongue, like a coin in a fountain. The conversation is fragile, precise, built to appear casual, but you know better. Every syllable has weight. The very air bends around it, yet your presence is irrelevant. You are only there to keep the corridors neat, to brush away the physical residue of human ambition. The emotional residue is beyond your touch. The floor beneath your feet creaks faintly as you move onward. The marble is smooth, cold, but the rugs soften your steps, hiding them almost entirely. You notice small imperfections in the walls, a tiny nick in the gold leaf, a small crack in the plaster. Dust has collected in the corners, untouched by the hands of those who believe in perfection. You sweep these areas carefully, aware that no one will ever see the work, that the reward is only in the act itself. A faint sound of a key turning in a distant lock causes you to pause. A door opens slightly, revealing the tip of a fan and the shimmer of silk beneath it. A conversation starts anew, murmured and soft, and then pauses as if someone remembered you might be near. You are not, but the room waits for your absence, your invisibility, as if it too knows the rules. You move down the hall toward a window, where sunlight slices across the floor in golden angles. The light illuminates dust particles, catching them mid-air. They float lazily, tiny witnesses to the palace's rituals, just as you are. You sweep the floor with slow, deliberate movements, each stroke erasing a fragment of the past while leaving another behind. It is impossible to know what will last and what will be forgotten, and yet the work continues, relentless. You pause at a corner where two hallways meet, and the whispers grow louder, overlapping. Names are repeated, favours traded, alliances hinted at and dissolved in half-breaths. It all flows past you, unnoticed, impossible to grasp entirely. You imagine threading through it like smoke, inhaling the scent of ambition and letting it pass through you, unabsorbed. There is no anger here, no longing, only observation, only the awareness of your own quiet persistence. The palace hums around you, a living thing composed of whispers, footsteps, dust and reflection. Each sound is part of a pattern, a rhythm that repeats endlessly. You sweep and brush, dust rising in small clouds that the sunlight transforms into tiny sparks. For a moment you imagine those sparks as voices, whispers of those who have come before you, echoing in every corner. Then the thought fades, silence returns, but not truly, only the deeper, quieter kind that hums behind doors and within walls. As the day advances, you continue through the halls, past the gilded mirrors and windows, past rooms filled with secrets that will never be yours. Your hands are steady, your movements deliberate. You dust, you polish, you move in invisible arcs that leave no mark on the world except the fleeting, ephemeral traces of order. The whispers follow you, curling around your shoulders, slipping under your arms, brushing against your ears. They never stop, and neither do you. Finally, you pause at the top of a small staircase. the sunlight streaming in from a nearby window. The whispers fade slightly here, absorbed by the marble, but you know they are never truly gone. The palace carries them always, storing every syllable in its walls, in its mirrors, in the dust beneath its rugs. You inhale slowly, the scent of wax and perfumed air mixing with the faint tang of sweat and stone, and then you step down, broom in hand, moving into the next corridor where more whispers await, more doors conceal secrets, more silence must be maintained. Night drapes itself over Versailles like a velvet curtain, soft and heavy. The corridors, once filled with sunlight and whispered gossip, are now hollow, shadows pooling in the corners and stretching across polished marble. The palace exhales quietly, and in the silence every sound seems magnified. Even your own breathing carries weight. You walk slowly, hands busy with a cloth and polish, tracing the contours of a brass doorknob. The metal is cool, but the polish warms it under your fingers. With each gentle circle, the surface gleams, reflecting the candlelight behind you twice. A small, perfect illusion. The reflection trembles as you adjust your stance, as if the palace itself is breathing in rhythm with you. The echoes arrive before you notice them, faint at first, then growing, layering over your own steps. Footsteps that might be yours, or might be someone else's, long gone. They drift down the hall, vanish, and reappear, indistinguishable from the sound of your own movements. You listen carefully, not out of fear, but out of habit. The palace remembers everything, and even echoes are a form of memory. You continue down the hallway, polishing small fixtures along the way. Door handles, banisters, brass plates set into the walls. Each reflection captures fragments of the room. Candlelight shimmering against the gilt edges of frames, shadows stretching across the floor. The faint hint of dust disturbed by invisible hands. The act itself is slow, meditative, a rhythm designed to soothe the mind, even as it reminds you of your own invisibility. The corridors stretch endlessly, twisting and folding like the corridors of thought itself. The mirrors catch your reflection from every angle, multiplying it until you feel like a ghost walking among ghosts. Sometimes in the corner of your eye, you think you see someone move, though there is no one there. The palace blinks, rearranges itself around you, and then stills again, leaving only the sound of your work and the soft hum of memory. You pause at a carved panel set into the wall. The surface is warm, from hours of unseen sun, though the sun has long since gone. You trace the intricate patterns with your fingertips, following the curves and flourishes. Dust clings to the recesses, and you brush it away with care, revealing the gilding beneath. It gleams faintly, a quiet triumph over time, though the work will be undone again by hours, days, decades. And still, you do it. Footsteps echo behind you again. You turn slowly, expecting someone, anyone, to be following. The corridor is empty. Only the faint residual warmth of recent passage lingers in the air. You inhale, the scent of wax and old stone filling your lungs. There is a sweetness to it, layered with the faint tang of iron from the candle sconces. Power has gone to bed, leaving only its residue in the still air, and you move through it like a shadow, careful not to disturb the fragile calm. You reach a small alcove, where the light from a single candle flickers against the wall. The flame dances in rhythm with your movements, and for a moment, the reflection in the polished doorknob seems almost alive. You tilt your head, watching the double image, one flame, two shadows. You imagine the corridor behind you, extending forever, filled with more reflections and echoes, each step multiplying into infinity. The palace hums quietly, and you realize that even in this emptiness, it is never truly silent. Somewhere, a servant shifts in the darkness, the scrape of shoes against stone carrying far along the corridors. Somewhere else, a door creaks, a key turns. The faint rustle of silk reaches you from a distant room. Each sound is absorbed, stretched, returned as echo, and you follow it with a hand brushing lightly over another brass knob, another mirror frame, another panel. In one chamber, the remnants of dinner linger. Silverware stacked neatly, trays polished until they reflect the ceiling. The smell of roasted meat has faded, leaving only the faint warmth of oil and wax. You pause at the threshold, listening to the faint reverberation of the music from earlier. A note here, a chord there, carried through the walls like an afterimage. It mingles with your footsteps and the brushing of cloth against metal, forming a tapestry of sound that is uniquely yours and yet belongs to the palace. You kneel briefly to polish a lower panel of a door. Dust rises in small clouds, catching the candlelight like flecks of gold. Your hands move slowly, deliberately, tracing the wood grain, erasing invisible histories. Each stroke is a small act of order, a quiet assertion of presence in a place that refuses to notice. And yet in the reflections, in the echoes, in the dust itself, there is proof that you exist, even if no one acknowledges it. A faint whisper brushes past you, carried from a distant corridor. Not words exactly, but the sound of breath, a sigh, the subtle scrape of a shoe against stone. You pause, holding your breath for an instant, listening. The sound dissolves into the architecture, indistinguishable from your own movements. The palace keeps its secrets well, but it cannot erase the impressions they leave behind. Echoes, reflections, and dust. The candle beside you flickers, and the shadow it casts stretches along the wall. For a moment, it looks almost like a figure moving, one of the courtiers perhaps, or a musician, or a servant long gone. You continue polishing, and the shadow remains, stretching and shrinking, in rhythm with the flame. It is a companion of sorts, silent and unjudging, bearing witness to your labour without expectation. You move into a wider corridor where marble pillars rise like columns of air, and the ceiling hangs distant above, painted with scenes of gods and heroes long forgotten. Each echo seems to cling to the columns, spiralling upward before dissolving into the vast space above. You follow, polishing, brushing, moving with care. The corridor feels infinite, though you know it will end eventually. Even so, the echoes make it feel alive, a pulse threading through the stillness. Your hands are steady, though your arms ache slightly from repetition. You notice the pattern of the marble under your fingers, the subtle variations in texture that time has carved into it. Each touch is a small acknowledgement of imperfection, a reminder that even in a palace built to deny it, decay is inevitable. You smile faintly at this thought, almost private, almost forbidden. A door swings open briefly at the far end of the corridor. The sound is soft, but it travels here, carried through stone and shadow. Someone moves within, a servant perhaps, or a courtier tending to a forgotten detail. The echo of the door shutting lingers long after the movement has ceased. You continue, polishing, brushing, following the rhythm of the echoes, as if they were instructions, guides, companions. The corridors feel endless tonight. Shadows stretch and fold, mirrors multiply your image and then swallow it. Dust rises in the candlelight, settling again only to be stirred by the next brush. Footsteps, whispers, sighs, all converge into a symphony of invisibility, a music that never sleeps. You are part of it, and yet apart. Your labour is essential, but unnoticed. Your presence acknowledged only by the reflections and the echoes that follow you. You pause at a final door, the handle gleaming faintly under the candlelight. You polish it until you can see the flame behind you reflected twice. The corridor behind is quiet now, except for the faint reverberation of your own movements and the distant soft hum of the palace settling for the night. You step back, admire the brief perfection of the reflection, then move on, carrying the echoes with you. Every step forward is another note in the unending music of the palace. You are both participant and observer, ghost and witness, brushing away traces while leaving some behind, ensuring that the Hall of Echoes continues its quiet song long after the candles have burned down. And as you move down the corridor, the palace listens, holding every whisper, every reflection, every faint footstep, and folding it into its memory, a silent witness to your existence that no one else will ever notice. The palace has changed its rhythm. The Sun King has retired, and the air itself feels different, heavier yet quieter, as though the building has exhaled after a day of performance. You walk along corridors that once thrummed with movement and conversation, now subdued, polished surfaces glowing faintly in candlelight. Each step is careful, deliberate, as if the marble itself might crack under the weight of careless noise. Candles flicker softly along the walls, and you carry your extinguishing tool with practiced ease. One by one you lean close, tilting each flame until it sputters and dies, a tiny hiss marking the end of illumination. The rooms darken incrementally, swallowing shadows that were only half formed in the waning light. You move slowly, deliberately, your hands steady, your eyes following the retreating reflections in polished handles, in gilded mirrors, in the burnished surfaces of chairs and tables. Each extinguished flame is a small erasure, a quiet signature of absence. You pause at a hall where the sunlight has long vanished, replaced by the faint glimmer of residual warmth in the marble. The echoes of the day linger, a footstep here, the faint scrape of a chair there, whispers of conversation carried in the walls. Now, they are all reduced to memory, shadows of sound you can follow only in imagination. The corridors are still, but you sense a pulse, subtle, mechanical, eternal. That is the palace's own. You move toward the chambers closest to the king. Servants who attended the final rituals of the day have dispersed, their presence leaving only faint traces. A piece of cloth folded carelessly, a polished handle still warm from touch, the lingering scent of musk and candle wax. The Sun King sleeps, but the palace does not. It breathes quietly, watching the rooms and corridors, as if aware of every movement, every emission. You step into the antechamber. The furnishings gleam faintly, the brass reflecting the remaining flickers of candlelight. Dust motes drift lazily, illuminated like stars in a miniature night sky. You brush a surface with a soft cloth, following the grain of polished wood, erasing evidence of unseen hands, while leaving the memory of your touch behind in the faint shimmer of light. It is repetitive work, necessary, unnoticed. You think about the hundreds of hands that have passed through this room, the countless small acts that maintain the illusion of perfection. The corridor stretches beyond, lined with mirrors and sconces. You extinguish another candle, listening to the hiss, noting the way shadows recoil and rearrange themselves. Each time, a small wave of silence follows, deeper than the one before. The palace grows vast in the absence of light, rooms stretching into darkness as though space itself has expanded. The absence is almost physical, pressing against your back and shoulders, urging careful, measured movement. You reach the king's outer chamber. The door is heavy, adorned with carvings and gilded trim that catch the faint glow from the corridor. Your hand lingers on the handle, feeling the cold metal through the warmth of your palm. You do not enter. The king's presence is both invisible and absolute, and the act of cleaning around it requires a particular kind of attentiveness. You adjust the candle nearby, letting it stand sentinel before lowering it slowly, watching the flame die and sending the room into darkness. The hall beyond is nearly silent now. The faint hum of the palace's infrastructure, distant footsteps, the whisper of curtains settling, the soft creak of floorboards, forms a quiet accompaniment to your movements. You notice the texture of marble beneath your fingers, the subtle variations that tell stories of centuries. Dust, polished away only moments ago, still clings faintly, in corners and along edges. You brush again, smoothing surfaces until they capture light like liquid, though only the faintest glimmer remains. Your eyes trace the long corridor, noticing reflections in gilded mirrors. You are doubled, tripled, an unintentional observer of your own repetition. The shadows around you stretch and bend with candlelight, merging with the shapes of furniture, architectural flourishes, and wall carvings. Even in darkness, the palace insists on presence, on movement, on acknowledgement of its perfection. You are part of the mechanism that maintains it. Silent, small and unseen, you pause near a set of folded curtains, their silk hanging heavy and still. A faint draught carries the scent of the gardens, mingled with wax and warmed stone. You straighten the folds, brushing your hands lightly along the fabric, restoring symmetry and order. The touch is delicate, intimate in a way the corridors cannot be. The silk responds slowly, yielding under your fingers, the edges catching what little light remains. For a moment the world contracts, you, the fabric, the quiet palace breathing around you. A soft creak echoes from a distant chamber, and you turn instinctively. Broom poised but unnecessary. It is likely nothing. The palace itself settling, marble contracting, wood expanding in the cool nights are still. The sound reminds you that even in this silence, life persists, unseen, unnoticed, essential. You continue your rounds, extinguishing candles in smaller chambers, brushing away dust that reflects the faint glimmer of remaining light. Each motion feels deliberate, ritualistic, as if the act of maintenance is itself a kind of meditation. The air is thick with history, heavy with centuries of perfume, wax, and the faintest traces of food. You inhale slowly, letting the scent settle, the smells layering like a palimpsest of service. You move methodically, aware that every surface, every corner, every reflection carries the memory of hands long gone and of those who have come before. Your labour is continuous, unnoticed, but crucial, preserving the palace's illusion of perfection in the king's absence. You pause at a small hallway where the mirrors multiply the candlelight, shadows bending and stretching like liquid. You see yourself reflected endlessly, every movement echoed in triplicate, a phantom army of one. You imagine the palace watching, attentive and patient, recording your rhythm, storing it within walls that will outlast all human memory. Here in the quiet, you are a bridge between history and the present, a ghostly presence shaping perfection even as it slips into invisibility. The final candles are extinguished with deliberate care. The hisses mark the end of the day's performance. Darkness expands across the chambers and corridors, settling like a blanket over gilded furniture, mirrors, and polished floors. The palace is asleep but not silent. It hums faintly in response to your movements, holding every reflection, every dust mote, every flicker of light in memory. You step back, hands clean but faintly soiled from wax and dust, breathing the layered air of the hallways. The silence that follows feels larger than the rooms themselves. It is a quiet full of possibility, a tangible absence, a weight that presses against your shoulders and chest. The palace exhales again, deeper this time, as if relieved. You move through it one last time, adjusting a curtain, straightening a tray, running a cloth along a banister. Each gesture is small, precise, a silent testimony to the unseen labour that sustains the illusion of grandeur. Outside, the gardens are dark, geometric shapes reduced to shadow. Inside, mirrors reflect only candlelight long extinguished, creating the sense that you are moving through multiple realities at once. Your steps are measured, careful, absorbed into the rhythm of the palace. You pause briefly at a window, looking out at the still fountains, their water motionless in the darkness, reflecting nothing but the faint hint of moonlight. You inhale, carrying the scent of wax and stone, silk and polished metal. For a moment, the palace feels suspended, time held in a quiet pause, balanced on the edge of night and labour. The king sleeps, but the work continues silently, invisibly, an unbroken chain of presence that maintains the grandeur of Versailles. And as you retreat into the quieter corridors, the echo of your movements stretching behind you, you realise that this is the true rhythm of the palace, a cycle of light, labour, reflection and silence, uninterrupted and eternal. Your hands, weary yet steady, move with the quiet knowledge that everything here, grandeur, gilding, music, echoes, exists only because of these invisible, endless gestures. The night grows deeper. You pause in a final corridor, the polished surfaces around you reflecting faintly in the last residual light. Dust motes drift lazily in the shadows, undisturbed yet alive in their own way. The palace hums faintly beneath the surface of your awareness, a slow pulse, eternal and patient. You stand for a moment longer, savouring the stillness, the quiet, the weight of unacknowledged labour, before moving on to return to the servant quarters, carrying the palace's silence with you like a second skin. The corridors are empty now. You move through the last passages, your hands faintly scented with wax and polish, carrying the residue of hours spent coaxing gilded surfaces to reflect a perfection no one will notice. The mirrors, the floors, the door handles, they gleam faintly, catching shadows in a way that almost makes them seem alive. You pause in the hallway one last time, listening to the distant hum of silence that has replaced the day's rituals. The air is cooler here, thinner, yet heavy with the perfume of memory. Dust swirls faintly. In the residual candlelight, catching on edges of furniture and along the carved ridges of panelling, each particle drifts lazily, as if it knows it has no purpose but to exist, to mark the space you have walked, the care you have taken, the labour no one will acknowledge. You run your fingers lightly over a polished rail, the wood smooth beneath calloused skin. For a moment you imagine that even the palace holds its breath, waiting with you for the final act of retreat. You turn a corner into the servant quarters. The rooms are small, narrow and sparse, but they are yours. A cot waits in the far corner, simple, worn, unadorned. You drop the tools you have carried all day onto a small table, the faint clang of metal against wood echoing softly. Even here, in your own space, the palace lingers. The scent of wax, faint iron, and old stone follows you, settling in the corners like a loyal shadow. You bend over the cot, tracing the edges of the thin mattress with a hand that has spent hours tracing the grandeur of Versailles. The walls are thin, papered in a faded pattern that the sun has long since stolen from colour. You can hear a distant door creak, a faint footstep, the low murmur of someone settling in another room. The palace does not sleep completely, it cannot. Its presence, layered over centuries, is too heavy to vanish. But here, in the small quarters, the noise becomes softened, transformed into a gentle hum that could be mistaken for your own heartbeat. You lie down slowly, the cot sagging slightly beneath your weight. The candlelight has long been extinguished, but the afterimage lingers behind your eyelids. Flickering like memory itself, your fingers brush against the fabric of the sheet, the rough weave against smooth skin. The scent of wax still clings faintly to your hands, and you inhale it once more, letting it settle in your lungs. The smell is familiar, comforting in its repetitiveness, a quiet marker that another day of unseen labour has been completed. The faint murmur of the palace drifts through the thin walls. You imagine the gilded corridors you polished earlier, the mirrors that multiply your own reflection and yet reveal nothing, the whispers behind doors that have long since gone to rest. You are both distant and present in that world, removed yet inseparable from the rhythm of service that defines the palace. It hums quietly in your chest, an internal echo of everything you have touched, swept, polished, and straightened. You close your eyes. The memory of the Hall of Mirrors passes behind your eyelids, flickering between light and shadow. You can still feel the chill of marble under your fingertips, the hum of candlelight across brass fittings, the soft thrum of footfalls that were never yours. Your body is tired, but your mind remains a quiet observer, recording the textures, the patterns, the minutiae that no one else will ever notice. Sleep approaches slowly, like a visitor walking through these vast corridors, careful not to disturb the palace's fragile stillness. The clock ticks somewhere, slow, deliberate, eternal. Each beat marks the passage of invisible time, the slow unwinding of another day. The sound penetrates the thin walls of the servant quarters, merging with the faint rustle of fabric, the settling of wooden beams, the sigh of stone cooling in the night air. You focus on it, each tick a steady anchor, pulling you away from reflection, away from the weight of labour and expectation, toward the quiet machinery of dreams. Your hands rest at your sides, stained faintly from polish, faintly glimmering from the last remnants of wax. They are the hands that have held nothing but tools and dust, that have traced the contours of the palace with both care and resignation. They are both the proof of your presence and a testament to your absence, essential, invisible, fading even as they leave traces. You flex them slowly, feeling the tiny aches in your wrists and knuckles, each movement a subtle acknowledgement of the work that has filled the day. Outside the windows, the gardens lie still. Fountains sleep, their water frozen in dark reflections. Trees stand motionless, trimmed and trained to obey lines and patterns. Even in darkness, the symmetry of the world beyond the palace walls mirrors the symmetry inside. Controlled, precise, unbroken. You imagine stepping outside, letting the night air wash over you, but instead you remain here, cocooned in your own small chamber, carrying the day's residue with you into the quiet. The scent of silk, of candle wax, of warmed stone drifts faintly through the room. It mingles with the lingering presence of other servants, other shadows, other invisible labour that has built and maintained this palace for generations. You breathe it in, letting it settle like a second skin, thick and heavy and comforting. You are not alone, though solitude is all you feel. You are part of a continuum, a silent participant in the slow, ceaseless rhythm of Versailles. You imagine that the palace watches you, even now, holding every gesture, every reflection, every faint mark of presence. You are home in its silence, even as it reminds you of your smallness. A faint shiver passes over your skin, not from cold, but from awareness, of continuity, of time, of being part of something immense that will outlast you entirely. The palace is eternal, yet fragile, grand, yet meticulously maintained by invisible hands. Yours tonight are among them. You exhale slowly, letting the day slip further away. The hours of polishing, dusting, extinguishing, observing, all folding neatly into memory, invisible to anyone but yourself. Your body surrenders to the quiet insistence of sleep, the gentle pull of oblivion, the machinery of dreams that is patient, unhurried, and absolute. The palace waits, but it is patient. It will not demand your attention until the sun rises again. You feel the slow, soft tug of dreaming begin. The corridors of mirrors, the polished halls, the rooms full of whispers, the garden fountains, the faint hum of the palace itself, all dissolve into a continuous haze of images and sensations. You move within them without effort, gliding past surfaces you polished, shadows you observed, echoes you followed. It is a world you know intimately, yet one where your labour is now unnecessary, your presence unobserved, your mind finally unburdened. The candlelight you extinguished, the dust you brushed, the mirrors you reflected, the doors you straightened, all of it becomes part of the quiet architecture of your dream. Each memory is a thread woven into a tapestry that folds and stretches, timeless, infinite. The palace hums faintly, its heartbeat echoing through walls and stone, and you move in rhythm with it, part of the machinery that no one will acknowledge, but that sustains everything around you. Your body lies still, exhausted yet serene. The air is thick with wax, dust and stone, yet it feels comforting, familiar, protective. The palace holds you in its vastness, as it holds every secret, every polished surface, every whisper and echo. You are invisible, but not absent, small but essential. The quiet beyond the gold enfolds you, finally, completely. You exhale once more, slowly, and the machinery of dreams pulls you under. The corridors, the reflections, the echoes, the silence all fold into a gentle, endless rhythm. You no longer polish, no longer sweep, no longer observe. You simply drift, suspended between presence and absence, between labour and release, between the gold and the dust. And finally, you disappear. And that brings us to the end of tonight's story. Feel free to like, subscribe, or leave a comment with another forgotten corner of history you'd like explored next. If you'd like early access to more of these quiet descents into forgotten history, ad-free audio of the episodes, or just want to support the show, there's a link to the Patreon in the description. If you're listening on a podcast app, a rating or review helps more people find their way to these stories. And special thanks to the supporters who make this show possible, including our chroniclers, Andrew S., Rich Davis, and Leslie Schofield. Sleep well.